God's good all the time, every time. You know, we celebrated a holiday this week, Veterans Day. Are there any veterans here today? If you would, please stand up. I know outside we've got probably 2, if not 3, veterans outside in the cars, and I want to tell them out there thank you as well. I want to tell you people thank you very much. You served and you saw us through hard times. Goodness of God. And nobody wants to think of war, participate in war, be at war. Nobody wants to think of the need for a standing army. Nobody wants to think of those things. But in the midst of those things, we get to see goodness. And that's in the people who serve and who gave and who continue to give today, even so many years after they're out of those services. You continue to give. And we thank you. We are grateful to you. Your nation is grateful, and in particular, me, these people around you are grateful, and we thank you for what you did for our country. Before I go any farther, I want to ask a prayer. Father God, I thank you for another opportunity to stand in your pulpit. Lord, I ask as I'm here today that I not be a hindrance or a stumbling block to anyone. I ask that my words be according to your will and your way and your word. Lord, I ask these things all in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I'm going to be distracted the rest of the day if I don't tell you. It's good to see you. I like the bold-fashioned statement. I'd be distracted the rest of the morning if I didn't get that out of the way first.
Screen up.
I'm sorry. The film producer is telling me to put this up because it's missing pictures of it. Jeff sent me that song Friday while I was writing, and after I studied all week and was prepared to put in the paper, and of course that changed everything. So as always is, I started over and I had something to file away for later. I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and I've never gone back and pulled anything out of that file and used it, but I guess we'll continue to add to it so long as God keeps prompting you and prompting me to do something different for him. But all my life he's been faithful. All my life he's been so good. Can y'all apply that to your life? How many of you would say that about your life? How many of you can recognize that God has been faithful in your life for your whole life? He has been. He has never forsaken, never let you down. Even as you men who just stood up and went off to serve your country in dangerous circumstances, situation, even as you did that, God was still faithful to you. He was still there. Y'all could say it, but would you? Everyone here could say that God has been faithful and God has been good, but so many wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say that for different reasons. They would look at their life and their circumstances and they would say, but how could, or but why would, or they would say these things. And the short answer, and I want to say it before I go any farther, and I hope to continue to answer this question throughout the day. The short reason is why and how could, that's because of our sinful nature. And in the midst of all those things, God was still there. I want to give you something else to think about too. We've been going through this thing, COVID, for a few years now. We don't seem to do well when things are smooth, do we? Y'all remember the crowds outside when we were all worshiping outside? You remember how many people were out here? I'm fussing a minute right now, kind of fussing, halfway fussing. We had big crowds when we were outside. We came inside, and the first few Sundays inside, we had big crowds inside too, elbow to elbow. And we got a nice crowd today, don't get me wrong. But when things were hard, when we were in what we thought was a struggle or a fight, we came together and we stood there with him, knowing that God was faithful and knowing that we had a responsibility to stand up and proclaim his goodness and tell people that we Christians are not going to be silenced or shut down by a virus or by government. We had a responsibility to do that, and we did that. And what's happened now, this virus is kind of subsiding a little bit. Or we're getting used to it. Whichever side you want to fall on. Don't quite think coming to church is quite as important as it was in the midst of the virus, do we? I say that, and I know some of you are sitting here going, oh, that's silly, preacher. Don't say that. It is just as important. Well, the numbers don't bear that out. And I don't want to be a numbers preacher. I don't want to come up here and gauge our success in this church on how many people are sitting in the pews. I don't want to do that. Because I believe that there are good and righteous churches all over this place, all over this country, that are going to have a handful of people in them. That are going to have a few people in them. And God set them there for a purpose. And our purpose may be to be a mega church. It may be to stay with these same few people here. I don't know what God has our purpose. I don't understand God's ways. His ways are not my ways. I can't understand his ways. So I can't say because of numbers. But when you look at people come forward and profess faith in God and profess his goodness and claim his sovereignty, his leadership over your life when we're in a struggle. And then when it starts to smooth out a little bit, Sunday 9:30 in the morning for church is too early. It's too cold outside. The weather's changing. My bones just hurt. My car heater doesn't heat up fast enough. Got family gonna come in today or tomorrow. I need to get ahead of cooking. Now I'm just coming up with the excuses that I hear, that I get. And I'm gonna tell you, when you tell me that excuse, I'm going, okay. All right. I understand. And I do understand. I don't understand that you need to stay home and cook for your family that's going to be here tomorrow or next, whatever, Thursday I don't understand that you need to do that. I do understand where you're coming from. I understand that we made a choice as to what's going to be important in our lives. And we made a choice as to what we're going to do and what kind of Christian we're going to be. We made a choice. I understand that. But I want you to understand that all of your life he's been faithful. And all of your life he's been good to you. And nothing you can do is going to repay him. He doesn't want you to do anything to repay him, but doesn't he deserve so much better than we give? Mm-hmm. Doesn't he deserve so much better? Our Bible is filled with stories about people who this goodness is revealed to. And I want to look at just a couple of them. Here in Exodus chapter 16, the Israelites are given manna, bread from heaven. The Israelites have wandered in the desert after their deliverance from Egypt, and they're starving, and God gives them manna from heaven. Bread falling from heaven. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Y'all know who they are? They were faithful to God, and they were thrown into a fiery furnace. And instead of burning up, the king looks in and he says, I see them plus one more. Daniel 3:25 says, he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Now, I can give you a lot more examples about this God's goodness. But let's just stop there. Let's concentrate there. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked a faithful life, refusing to bow to the king's golden idols, refusing to give in to what society said they would do or should do, refusing to give in to the authority that stood over them and telling them how they were going to behave, how they were going to act, who they were going to worship. They stood in the face of those things and said, I'm not. Said, I won't do that. Made the king mad. And y'all, you know you can't make a powerful man mad. You can't make a powerful government mad. You can't do that. Because there's going to be a price to pay. There's consequences. What we used to like the consequences and repercussions. Y'all, there's consequences and repercussions. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is going to have to live with that. They're going to have to live with those consequences. That king said, oh, you'll bow. And they wouldn't. And he fired that furnace. He fired that furnace so many times more powerful, more hot than it was ever before. And the men taking Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to that fire, throwing them in. The men died. The fire was so hot. The men tasked with taking them to the fire died. It was so hot. And what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Y'all know the story. If you don't, you better be staying to go to Sunday school. You supposed to know the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, after being thrown into the fire, it was so hot it killed the men, took them over there, walking around in the fire, and their clothes ain't even singed. I imagine don't even smell like smoke. Just my imagination. Because the goodness of God goes so much farther than I would ever know, than I could ever understand. But their faithfulness, God walked, God stood, God stayed, and God protected them. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego told the king, he said, "Oh king, if God wants to, he'll save us from this fire. He'll save us from this furnace, and if he don't, we'll serve him anyway. Where he is anyway." Because all their life, God had been faithful. And all their life, God had been good to them. So they knew that whatever they received, whatever flowed from the mouth of God, whatever came from his head, whatever plan came into their life was exactly what it should be. If it be dying in a fiery furnace, then they would go to see him now. If it be walking in the furnace, I don't know what they'd done. They're playing hopscotch. I don't know what they was doing. I don't know if they were just walking around and around looking up to King. You can let us out any time now. We got things to do. We got places to go. The fourth was like the Son of God walking around with them. And you know their faithfulness, you know what happened in that moment? The king looked in and the king saw. The king saw, and he didn't just see this supernatural occurrence with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walking in the middle of a furnace. He didn't just see that, but he saw God's presence. He says, like the Son of God. Now I looked at several different versions because I wanted to see if when he was talking about like the Son of God, if this king who worshiped idols had a small g represented as their God, or if he was recognizing that this was the creator, the true God. I wonder who he saw there. You know, we know from when they came out, and he said, this God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were, this is the true God. So we know he had a change of heart. We know that. And we can show that. People can see that in us. If we walk that righteous, that godly life in the midst of these fires, in the midst of these troubles, people will see. Because they're going to look at me and they're going to look at you and they're going to say, well, how can you stand strong through all that? And the answer is as it always has been. Because I ain't standing by myself. I'm not standing alone. Because if I was, y'all, I would have to hit my knees. There's no way I could stand up under the burden. No way I could stand up under the weight. That's just me. And the struggles in my life are never just me. The struggles are never just me. The struggles are always his struggles. The burden is always his to bear. Now, I know, you and me, we both, from time to time, we pick them up ourselves and we try to carry them. And invariably, the same thing happens when we pick those burdens up. Our knees get weak and they buckle. And when we depend on our strength, we pick that load up, we bear that burden, and we walk, and we stumble, and we trip, and we hurt ourselves. We do all these things when we try to bear our burden, but it's never been meant that way. And God, all my life, since the time he thought of me, since he spoke me into existence, since he spoke you into existence, he was making a plan for my life, and he ain't made no plan with the intent of laying out on part of it. But their faithful obedience to God landed them in a fiery furnace and also brought God into that furnace with them. He saw when he heard the faith of these three, when they told the king no matter what, they wouldn't be worshiping his golden idols. He also heard when they spoke up and said God was deliverer. But even if, they still wouldn't forsake him. They knew God to be good, and they knew that whatever he deemed appropriate would also be good. And that's God being faithful to the faithful. First example I gave you was of Israel being fed manna from heaven. In this example, God wasn't feeding the faithful Israel. I held back on that part. Because y'all remember why they got the manna? Because after being delivered from Egypt, after God rescued them, saved them, brought them out, after Moses led them out of that place where they were subject and enslaved, and after God led them out to that place, what did they say? When we hungry, back in Egypt, our pot was full. We could eat meat. They sure weren't deserving of one of the greatest examples of caretaking that I can imagine. Having bread fall from heaven for them. They surely weren't worthy of that. They surely hadn't done anything to deserve that, but God gave it to them anyway. And he gave it to them anyway because they were his children. Just another example of how I could never deserve what he gives. I could never live up to, I could never do anything that would have God look upon me and say, well, that one's worth a miracle. The miracle is that I'm faithful sometimes. That's the miracle, because the sin nature has filled us, has overtaken us. The sin nature is there, and we fight against that sin nature, and we do right and we do righteous, because our Bible tells us there's none good here. Not one. Not one good. Even though I use the word from time to time, you use the word from time to time, there's not one good here. But God still looks on us, a failing people. He still looks on us and blesses and gives to us. And it looks so different so many times, so many ways it looks so different. But he's feeding the complaining people. Said that they wished they had been left behind in Egypt. See, God watches over his children. He blesses the faithful. And he assures that even though they may walk through fire, that he walks with them. I think if we're honest, that we would say we fit in both of those groups from time to time. Sometimes I'm the faithful person who receives the blessing I believe God would give. Some other times I'm the complaining child who's blessed and can't see the blessing or isn't appreciative of the blessing. There's some real consistent things happening here. One is that mankind is consistently all over the place. We can be at the top of a mountain, or we can be way down low in a valley. We can walk a faithful and God-pleasing life one minute and then fall the next breath. Those things are consistent for us. Our constant is how unpredictable we are, but God's constant too. One of his constants is that he's always good. He always loves, and he's always good. When he's feeding us or when we're walking in the fire, he's always there. When we're at the top of the mountains, he's there. When we're at the bottom of the valleys, he's there. We got to leave our understanding behind. The world would have us to believe that if the path isn't clear and it ain't easy, we're on the wrong path. Christian's path is not going to be an easy one, though. It never has been. Jesus Christ has always been persecuted. His followers have been persecuted as well. Satan lies and steals, he kills and destroys, and that's his constant. We should do all that we can to change our constant in our life. We should go from our constant being that we can't be constant, our faithful followers. We should go from not appreciating our blessings to faith that whatever God gives to us is a blessing, whether or not we recognize it as a blessing or not. Know that God is good and God is good all the time. We have a great example this week as we celebrate Veterans Day because of the circumstances that brought these veterans into need. Is war. War. And God saw to that. And God said, I'm going to make a way. And this is nothing new. It's not anything. It wasn't invented with today's modern army. It wasn't invented there because God's children have been in battle forever. God's children have always. I don't remember where it was, Wednesday or last Sunday, talked about Christians being a derogatory term. In the Bible, they were called people of the way. And so it wasn't being called a Christian a slur. And it was. It was. God looked and he gave us Jesus Christ. And And Jesus Christ was mocked and persecuted, and he was made fun of, and all those things. And so when they looked upon us and called us Christian, and it was pointing a finger at, they were with him. They were with him. So what we've done is we've embraced that name, that Christian, that thing that was meant to be a slur. We've embraced it. We take it to be our own. Yes, a Christian. That's what I am. You know, I'm a follower of his. You know who he is? The one that was beaten, persecuted, and died all for me. You know what his constant was? That each time he was persecuted, he went to do it again. Each time he was beaten, spat upon, each time they looked upon him and made fun of him, each time he went back for more. And he went back for more for what reason? Because of you. Because of you. Because you were going to need him. You needed him to do that. You needed him to show that. You needed him to set that example. And there's a lot of things that we take. Redneck. Y'all remember when getting called redneck was fighting words? What happened to that? We embraced it now. Proud rednecks. That's what we are. Proud rednecks. Now, we could take something like that and be proud of it. Surely being called a Christian is something that you could write on your heart. Amen. Surely being called by his name is something that we can make a center part, a focal part in our life. Surely that's worth something to you. Now surely we'd be willing to give something for that. I ain't getting ready to pass the plate. Don't think that. I say we get ready to give, everybody's going, I ain't got but $5 in my pocket. I don't want your last $5. I want something that's harder for you to give up than the money, you old stingy rascal. I want something a lot harder than that. I want you to give him your heart. I want you to give him your love, your obedience. I want you to give him that which you hold back from him. Because if it was as simple as handing over the last 20 in your pocket, you could do that and walk away from you and say, I'll give you another 20. That's not what I'm asking for. That's not what he's asking for. What he's asking for is everything that you're holding in here. Everything that you've got in here, everything that you are in here, everything that keeps you down in here, he's asking for all of that. All of that, all the good, all the bad, all the struggle, all the celebration and joy. He's asking for all of that. All of that. Because all his life he's been faithful. Y'all got kids? You know why you want to be part of your kids' life a lot in the later years? Because you struggle with them little knuckleheads their whole life. It's about time you get to see some of the fruit, ain't it? I got to speak at Kelsey's graduation, and I told him, Mama is going to be going into the grocery store, and she's going to have her pocketbook with her. And this was back when we used to carry pictures in your pocketbook. You roll them out. It wasn't on your telephone. And Mama's got to have some ammunition for the other mamas. So I told them as they leave high school to go out and give Mama some ammunition. Something that she could pull out of her pocketbook and say, this right here, this is my oldest one. This is my middle one. Let me tell you what they do. You know what that does for Mama's heart? You know, when Mama gets to stand and brag over what you've done, you know how it makes her feel. I ain't trying to be sacrilegious, y'all, but don't you think God would love to be able to pull his cell phone out and go, this one right here, this one's a mess, y'all. Let me tell you what he does. Now, let me tell you what this one's done. I spoke at a men's group one time, and I used myself and a friend who I was there with as example in this group, because probably didn't neither one of us look like what we ought to look like if you go and speak at a men's group. I ain't exactly the picture or the example that they would hold up and say he was coming. But the words I said to them is, you might not be impressed with where I am, but if you knew where I come from, it'd mean a whole lot more. You know, you and me, we come a long way. Some of us farther than others. And we came a long way because we had somebody to meet. We had a trip that was worth going on. We had a place that was worthy of being. And that place is in his presence. That place is with him. All my life he's been faithful. All my life he's been good. At times I was walking out in front, and I just imagined him walking behind me, kind of kicking rocks, going, what's this boy doing now? What's he thinking now? When's he going to ever realize that I'm standing over his shoulder? When's he ever going to realize that I'm here? And then I think about the day when I said, Lord, where are you? Come on over here a little closer. And I think about how much different my walk is, how much better my walk is. And I think about the things that hold me back now versus the things that held me back then. And the things that held me back then are still there, y'all. Don't get me wrong. The things that held me back then are still there. I still struggle with those things. You know, that favorite sin I like to talk to you about. I still struggle with those things. But each time that they rear their heads, I can say, Lord, you know I ain't strong enough to deal with this. You straighten this out for me. And then you just back yourself out. And that shoulder that he was walking over, this is my picture of it in my head. That shoulder that he was walking over, I kind of tilt it down. And he comes out and he walks up front. And truthfully, I know I should allow him to walk up front all the time. But I'm just a man who fails a lot. But when you stop, when you hesitate that moment, and you say, I probably can't do this, and you let him walk up front, the path is clear, Joe. Just imagine God walking through ahead of you. Imagine how he goes through your path. Imagine the bushes and the trees parting. You hunters, imagine the briars suddenly ain't at your feet no more. Imagine you don't have to struggle through. You don't have to go. You don't have to swing a machete. You don't have, imagine those things not being necessary because the path straightens for God. And that's the way I look at it. It might not straighten. Maybe he walks it in this curvy and maybe he's out front with the cane just smacking all these things away from me. All I know is that when I get there, it's a nice path. The world is still there. The world is still there. I know that just off to the left and just off to the right, there's still briars just waiting to get me. So long as I stay in his footsteps, so long as I stay walking where he's walking, it's all right. I want to ask our musicians to come forward. We're going to have a hymn of invitation. And I want to tell you, God's calling you. God is good, and he's always been good. He'll continue to be good. Oh, you and me is going to ascribe lots of different things to him. We're going to say, how could you, Lord, and why would you, Lord? He's going to say, we're going to say those things, and I want to tell you, the answer is he didn't. He didn't. He created a perfect world. He created a perfect world, and we messed it up. Amen. We brought all these things into the world. Y'all remember in the Old Testament, back in Genesis, they lived hundreds of years until sin took over. Until sin shortened their lives and made their lives harder. They lived all those times. And I'm going to tell you that even in a life of hundreds of years, y'all, life is still short. But there's one constant, and that's him. It's one constant is the place he's going to offer to you. Now, wherever you're at in your life, whatever your walk is, whatever your struggle is, whatever your sin, whatever your favorite sin is, you can give it up and he'll take care of it. He'll handle it. Well, I can't. I can't. He can. All my life he's been faithful. All of your life he's been faithful. All of our lives he's been good. And he wants nothing more than that for you right now. As we sing, you come and do your business with God.
308. 308.